Tonight, Gaza compared to the Wild West. An IDF whistleblower describes how the life or death of a civilian can be dependent on a commander's mood. After 3 tours in Gaza, the soldier reveals his unit was ordered to shoot anyone who entered no-go zones, even if they pose no threat.
In their mind, these people aren't innocent.
When people have been shot and killed, were they just left where they were?
Usually, yes.
He broke his silence as Prime Minister Netanyahu arrived in Washington to meet the US president and as indirect talks between Israel and Hamas continue. So will Donald Trump declare peace this week? His administration has called on the United Nations to sack its human rights advisor after a report criticized some American companies. We'll speak to Francesca Albanese live this evening. Also on the program, should residents have been warned earlier? Questions for authorities in Texas after at least 91 people were killed in flash floods. And a verdict in the case that gripped Australia. Erin Patterson is found guilty of triple murder. She went looking for death cap mushrooms and served them to her family in beef Wellingtons. Coming up, the 3 lies that led to her conviction. That's all coming up on The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Good evening. Donald Trump has made a habit of pledging peace, and in the past week, he's increased the pressure for a ceasefire deal in Gaza, declaring it could be possible within days. Israel has agreed to the terms of a truce, but Hamas still have concerns. That's why tonight, negotiators from both sides are still holding indirect talks in Qatar. The US president is hoping he can soon stand in the White House alongside the Israeli Prime Minister to announce at least a temporary pause in the fighting. These images, photographed by an Israeli reservist in Gaza, show a family home completely destroyed. He's decided to speak after wrestling with his conscience. He says civilians are being gunned down at random, even if they pose no threat. The IDF has denied those accusations. To date, the Gaza Health Ministry says almost 60,000 Palestinians have been killed since October 2023. Some reports suggest the number of people killed could be significantly higher. More than 136,000 people are believed to have been injured since the fighting started. We'll discuss the terms of any ceasefire in a moment, but let's get started with this report from Sky's international correspondent Alex Rossi.
I think everything in war is kind of messes you up.
It is rare to hear Israeli soldiers speak openly about their time in Gaza. But after 3 tours of duty, this reservist says his conscience won't let him stay silent.
Every commander can choose for himself what he does, so it's kind of like Wild West. And so some commanders can really decide to do war crimes and do bad things and like don't have very consequences of that.
He agreed to talk on condition of anonymity, fearing he could be labelled a traitor or ostracised at home. These photos were taken while he was serving in Gaza, where he was stationed in the homes of displaced Palestinians.
I think you can't be in this scenario for so long and not like normalize it and not like kind of you lose your mind and then killing is more and more normalized and you can't see the problem in it.
He was first called up on October the 8th, the day after the Hamas terror attack. And it didn't take long before he had serious concerns about how the war was being fought.
There was a building near our territory that Gaza citizens tried for a few days. They came there trying to steal like metals and solar panels and stuff like that, so they could sell it and have some money. Like for sure there were no terrorists over there, but because it was like in the territory that they are not supposed to be in, and it also varied between days, but some days they decided to shoot them.
During his deployments, he was stationed in what's known as the Netzarim corridor, a key Israeli military zone created during the war that cuts across central Gaza, dividing the territory into north and south, giving the IDF greater control.
They don't really talk to you about civilians that may come to your place. Like, I was in the Netzarim road, and they say, if someone comes to here, it means that he knows he shouldn't be there, and if he still comes, it means he's a terrorist. But I don't, this is like what they tell you, but I don't really think it's true. They might be shot, they might be captured. Really depends on like the day, the mood of the commander.
So what would be the reaction from soldiers when they killed a civilian?
I think a lot of them really feel like they did something good. Because like I think the core of it, that in their mind, these people aren't innocent.
When people have been shot and killed, were they just left where they were?
Usually, yes.
We put the allegations of arbitrary killings in the Netzarim corridor area to the Israeli military. They told us the IDF operates in strict accordance with its rules of engagement and international law, taking feasible precautions to mitigate civilian harm. The IDF operates against military targets and objectives and does not target civilians or civilian objects. It went on. In order to mitigate harm to the civilian population, the IDF issues evacuation warnings to the civilian population and requests it temporarily evacuate certain areas of intense fighting for its safety. The IDF continuously informs the civilian population of any changes. Reports and complaints regarding the violation of international law by the IDF are transferred to the relevant authorities responsible for examining exceptional incidents that occurred during the war. This is just one soldier's account. He says he's speaking out now out of moral duty.
Kind of feel like I took part of something bad. And so I think it's like I need to counter it with something good that I do. And I hope that by speaking of it, it can change like how things are being done. And I think a lot of people, if they knew exactly what's happening, they wouldn't, it wouldn't go down very good for them, and they won't agree with it.
Alex Rossi, Sky News, Jerusalem.
Well, Jonathan Conricus is a former spokesperson for the IDF, now a senior fellow at the Foundation for Defence of Democracies. Thank you so much, Mr. Conricus, for joining us here on the programme. I just want to first get your reaction to our report there.
Yes, it's an interesting, thank you and good evening for having me on. It's been a while since I was last on Sky UK. I think it's an interesting report, and I think it reflects, one part of how ugly, difficult and horrible fighting in densely populated urban terrain is. And I think that what this young man, who I saw the last part of the episode of the interview, he looks like a more or less genuine man. I don't think he's motivated by anything sinister, but I think he's reflecting on how difficult it is to fight in such an area and what the challenges are on the battlefield. And beyond what the IDF's response, which you dutifully and professionally put in full length, and that's good, I'd say the following for people at home to be able to understand the complexity. When was the last time that anyone saw a Hamas operative, that we would refer to as terrorist, fighting in uniform? I don't recall Hamas fighting in uniform for the last year and a half. The only time that they've been in uniform is when they have been handing over hostages or in parades. And I think that's very important for people to understand that, unfortunately, there's no boundary, there's no distinction between civilian and military.
Are you comparing the actions of the IDF to what Hamas is doing and what Hamas has done? Because, if we talk about the IDF talks about being, one of the most moral armies on the planet, a responsible army. What we're seeing now, not just citing our report here, but Haaretz, one of the flagship newspapers in Israel, Israeli investigative reporters, talking about this being a widespread issue. It's not just about our report. We're now hearing more and more soldiers coming out and saying this. Are we seeing a breakdown in the chain of command of the IDF?
No, far from it. And I think you're citing two sources that are, the Haaretz report was widely condemned, and many times I've had credit for and respect of Haaretz, but I think this report was very, very politically motivated and founded again on anonymous sources that were not speaking up and were not providing any claims. And since the claims are interesting and they fall into the narrative that is very popular here on Sky and many other outlets, which seeks to put blame and responsibility on Israel, it is widely amplified. I think that it is far from true.
I mean, if I can just...
I'll just continue.
Because I just want to point out...
I would just like to continue and the answer, because at the bottom line, we are fighting in an environment which is tactically almost impossible to maintain clear lines and distinction.
What we're talking about here, Mr. Conricus, is not a combat zone. We're talking about people coming, civilians coming to seek aid.
No, we are talking about a combat zone. We are indeed talking about the combat zone.
Let's talk about the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, where the IDF comes to, mans and controls the area where people, civilians come to get food. On June 11th, we saw 57 people killed. On June 17th, 59 people killed. On June the 29th, around 50
allegedly, according to Hamas
killed.
numbers.
On June 29th, 31 Palestinians were killed.
Yes, all of those are allegedly, according to Hamas numbers.
To get food. So, Mr. Conricus, I mean, the fact is that whether or not you condemn our report or Haaretz's report, the point is that should the IDF not be taking responsibility for the actions of its soldiers?
No, I think you're very, very mistaken. And all of the numbers that you said, I think you should professionally say that this is allegedly and according to Hamas sources. And let's be clear who we're citing and referencing. I know that it's very tempting to use Hamas numbers as if they are true, but this is a terrorist organization that abducts civilians, murders people, and then lies about it in the media.
And you're sitting
there. And you're sitting there and saying as if those are true numbers. So I would caution.
These are Israeli investigative journalists who are saying it. It's a flagship Israeli newspaper that's talking about it. We've seen the IDF soldier in our report saying it. So you can sit there and condemn the soldier. You can condemn the Haaretz report, and you can say that these numbers of people who are dead may not be true. But do you not believe that the IDF should take responsibility for all of this?
I'll tell you what I believe. I'll tell you that I believe that the Israeli forces are fighting in a densely populated urban area where the enemy, Hamas, is using civilians as human shields, masquerades as civilians on the battlefield, and you are terribly mistaken. Hold on, you made quite a long monologue, and I would be really grateful if I could kind of get in a half an answer here.
But
and I will address it.
You're deflecting on what Hamas is doing.
No, I'm trying to answer your allegations, which are masquerading as a question, and I'm trying to answer the question by being factual. What I think is clear to anybody who is looking at the situation from an objective point of view, Hamas uses civilians, hides among civilians, and doesn't distinguish between itself and the civilian population. We've seen this before the war and throughout the war. That needs to be the foundation of understanding.
To get food.
That needs to be the foundation of the understanding before we get into what's happening on the ground. And anything is a battlefield in Gaza.
When I read you these numbers, do you accept that civilians, dozens and dozens of civilians, are being killed trying to get aid?
I know that there have been instances, yes, where there's been shots fired and there have been violence at the distribution sites. I fear that, the organization that stands to gain from it, it's not the IDF and it's not Israel. The organization that is trying to dismantle the independent provision of aid to Gazans is Hamas. And they are the ones who have been instigating events on the ground. So I think that is very important context for viewers to be able to know. I always ask myself, who stands to gain from a certain situation? from the disruption of humanitarian
we've got
aid,
about
it's only
a minute or
Hamas.
so left, but can I ask you, do you believe that soldiers within the IDF who have committed these crimes, and we've seen the likes of Ehud Olmert say that war crimes have been committed, a former Prime Minister of Israel,
Without
do you believe
substantiating them, yes.
that these soldiers should be prosecuted?
Most definitely, whenever an Israeli, and that, by the way, has already happened. We've had Israeli soldiers that have been reprimanded. We have them relieved from duty, even officers. Whenever there has been wrongdoing, and that unfortunately is part of war everywhere, British troops, American troops, whenever you fight, sometimes people make mistakes and sometimes there's wrong judgment, and then there's investigations, and then people face consequences, and that has already happened.
Should the IDF be accountable? And was there a breakdown in the chain of command here?
No, far from it. As much as you would want that to be the picture, I hate to disappoint you, that is not the situation. And one or two reports or anonymous stories do not paint a full picture. The picture is Hamas using civilians as their human shields, Hamas abusing the civilian population, and Israel being forced to fight in an environment where it's almost impossible to distinguish between who is a combatant and who isn't. Israel tries to do that. I think Israel goes to tremendous lengths in order to minimize that. And again, when was the last time that you reported of a Hamas combatant firing weapons in uniform? When did you last see a Hamas video?
I'm not sure the point you're making. What we're seeing here is IDF soldiers coming out in reports by Israeli reporters, by our journalists on the ground in Israel, saying that these crimes are being committed. We're showing you the numbers of civilians being killed, trying to simply get aid and food, whether they arrive early, whether they arrive late, whether they arrive on time.
Provided.
We see the death toll continue to rise
I think you're cherry-picking
on the ground in Gaza.
I think you're very much cherry-picking information because you failed to mention that more than 50 million meals have been provided over the last 4 weeks.
Well, you know,
and those are the same
we
Palestinians
can also go through the stats of the blockade that existed, which
food.
was widely
I think that's
condemned
important information for your viewers to be aware of, and the fact that you are not reporting it is not really good, not part of the story.
We've been reporting about the blockade, the aid blockade that lasted
but have you reported
for about
40
80
million
days.
meals that have been provided?
And we've been reporting about the number of people killed trying to get aid when the UN and various other charities and aid organizations haven't been able to get their trucks in, haven't been able to get their supplies in. And you've put in place this Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which is, you know, shrouded in controversy in the way that they've handled the aid.
Which is providing food to the people who need it, directly to those who need it, not to Hamas, not to corrupt UN organizations, but it is providing it directly to the people who need it. And of course you are upset, and of course UNRWA is upset, and of course many people are upset because this is undermining the control of Hamas over the Gaza Strip. And I understand that there are vested interest, UN and global interest, in keeping the status quo as it is. And what Israel is doing is providing food and is providing humanitarian aid directly to the people who need it. And I think people at home in the UK should understand that more than 40 million meals have been provided in 4 weeks. That's not nothing. That's a lot of food and a lot of honest aid that has been provided.
I think that the statistics and the aid agencies around the world speak for themselves when they talk about the issues that the people of Gaza face. Mr. Conricus, thank you very much for joining us here on the programme.
Thank you.
Now to Benjamin Netanyahu's trip to Washington, his third this year, at a time when President Trump is pushing hard for a Gaza ceasefire. Their meeting could give new urgency for the US truce proposal, but whether it leads to a deal that ends the war is unclear. Now, any ceasefire would, at least initially, last 60 days. There would be a phased release of hostages and a surge in aid being allowed into Gaza. 28 hostages would be returned in 5 stages, 10 of them living and the other 18 deceased. There'd also be Israeli troop withdrawals from parts of northern and southern Gaza. But this is a sticking point. Hamas wants the IDF completely out of Gaza. Israel says that won't happen unless the group surrenders and its leaders go into exile. Another point of contention, the push from Hamas for the UN and charities to retake control of aid deliveries from the US and Israeli-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. Hamas wants a guarantee that negotiations will lead to a permanent end to the war, including Israel releasing Palestinian prisoners detained since the October 7 attacks.
An agreeable and appropriate ceasefire proposal has been sent to Hamas. And I can also tell you Special Envoy Witkoff intends to travel to Doha later this week, where he will continue to engage in these discussions. And the Qataris and the Egyptians have been incredibly helpful partners in mediating these negotiations and discussions to bring peace to this region and end this conflict once and for all.
Okay, let's go straight to our US correspondent, Mark Stone, who joins us from Washington. And Mark, we understand that the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, is about to meet Special Envoy Steve Witkoff. I mean, this trip was supposed to almost be like a victory lap for Benjamin Netanyahu following the war with Iran. But of course, this Gaza ceasefire has also overshadowed that.
Yeah, you might be able to make out the Israeli flag flying on the front of Blair House, which is the presidential guest house here in Washington, just opposite the White House. Benjamin Netanyahu arrived here late last night, and in the next 20 minutes or so, he's due to meet Steve Witkoff in Blair House. He, of course, is Donald Trump's special envoy for the Middle East, a man who will travel and insert himself directly into those talks in Doha after having met Netanyahu. The other man here, very important, will be Marco Rubio, Secretary of State and National Security Advisor. So a meeting in the next few minutes will begin in Blair House. And then tonight, Netanyahu will head over here to the White House, where he will have a private dinner with Donald Trump. What is really curious, Yalda, is that he is here until Thursday. I can't remember a time where a world leader has spent more time in Washington in this way. Now, I think there are reasons for this. I think the hope and the best case scenario for Trump and Netanyahu, certainly for Trump, is for between now and Thursday, for the two of them to stand side by side and announce that a ceasefire has been achieved. And for Donald Trump, the self-styled peacemaker, that will be a big, significant moment, even if it's only at this stage a temporary ceasefire. You'll remember that midweek last week, Donald Trump announced that he hoped by the end of last week there would be a ceasefire. It hasn't come. We know Hamas's response, as you just outlined, was they changed some of the wording, real concerns over the future of the IDF in Gaza, over the language over 60 days or a permanent ceasefire, and the humanitarian delivery as well. So Hamas sent a reworded draft back to the Israelis. The Israelis rejected that, but they did send a delegation to Doha. So I think there is a lot of chat going on right now, and I wonder, and I just can't work this out, the extent to which Donald Trump will put firm pressure on Israel, on Netanyahu, to say, look, end this now. We will see what happens over the course of the next few days. It will be very interesting.
Mark, thank you as always. And as you say, we will be following these developments very closely. Well, our coverage of the war in Gaza continues after the break. Do stay with us. I'll be speaking to the UN's Francesca Albanese, who's called on countries to cut Israel off over what she calls an apocalypse in Gaza. Also ahead, the latest from Texas, where more than 90 people are now known to have been killed in flooding.
I'm Stephen Murphy, and I'm Sky's Ireland correspondent based here in Dublin.
The waters of Ireland and Britain should be home to great white sharks.
If there are great white sharks in this area, there's no reason they wouldn't come here to feed. It's basically a buffet on a beach. This could be not only a record-breaking storm, but potentially the most dangerous storm ever to hit Ireland.
Our app gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos and analysis.
Evidence of the crisis.
Podcasts, watching us live.
Live here from Washington.
Wherever you get your podcast.
All in one place. And all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
I'm Stephen Murphy, and I'm Sky's Ireland correspondent based here in Dublin.
The waters of Ireland and Britain should be home to great white sharks.
If there are great white sharks in this area, there's no reason they wouldn't come here to feed. It's basically a buffet on a beach. This could be not only a record-breaking storm, but potentially the most dangerous storm ever to hit Ireland.
You're watching The World. Welcome back to the programme. Well, we've been focusing tonight on the extraordinary claims from an Israeli military whistleblower about the conduct of forces in Gaza. With me now is the UN Special Rapporteur on the occupied Palestinian territories, Francesca Albanese. Thank you so much, Ms. Albanese, for joining us here on the programme. I just want to first of all get your reaction to our report and the young soldier who talked about some of the atrocities and some of the crimes that he witnessed.
This is not the first account of this sort that I come across. And yes, now this kind of testimonies are becoming more frequent. But I've also been hearing from Israelis on the ground that there is an alarm within the society because most of the young people coming out of Gaza who have been fighting what Israeli leaders clearly keep on calling a war, the impact that it has had on the soldiers, while the dehumanization of the Palestinians among them still continues. Many of them are haunted by what they have done, what they have seen. It doesn't make sense. This is not a war. This is an assault against civilians. And this is producing a fracture in many of them. Many of them are assisted by psychotherapists, but many of them are committing suicide. And instead of being in a state of denial, the state should stop and pause because the entire Israeli society is falling apart, especially the younger population, which has been turned into the willful executioner of a genocidal attack.
Well, we've seen 20 months of this, and we're also hearing from young Israeli soldiers coming out, whether it's in the Haaretz report that we saw last week or whether speaking to us, saying that there seems to be, from what we're hearing, a complete breakdown in the chain of command.
Well, my sense, and I've been looking at what the army has been doing since day one of this apocalyptic, of what it is an apocalyptic scenario right now in Gaza. And there has been something that has looked different from any other wars that Israel has engaged with against Gaza, against the entrapped population in that enclave that is Gaza. And it has been destructive from the very beginning. There has been an intention to destroy. The thing is that, as that soldier's testimony reveals, that especially the youngest among the soldiers have been convinced that this was a form of patriotism, of defending Israel and the Israeli society against this opaque but still very heartfelt enemy, which is Hamas. Everyone has been accused of being Hamas, a terrorist or supported to terrorism. But the thing is that they've come to confront the reality with, amid the rubble of Gaza, there were civilians, there were children collecting the remains and even among the rubble and trying to get a living. and they've been killed just for being in the wrong place. This is a script that has been enforced over the Palestinians for a long time, and probably this is the first time that the Israelis are, the Israeli soldiers are awakening to this, and they don't make sense to this because their attachment to being part of the IDF, which is embedded in their national ideology, is too strong. They cannot be traitor to that ideal, and this is why they are psychologically broken.
I want to ask you about a new report that you have put out where you're linking corporations with human rights issues. And you've called for sanctions and arms embargo on Israel for global corporations and to be held accountable for what you say is profiteering from genocide in Gaza. Can you tell me a little bit about this report and what you feel needs to be done?
Yeah, this is the outcome of over the 6 months long investigation during which I've received hundreds and hundreds of submissions, spoken with investigative journalists, sources on the ground, and built on literature that is decades old. In a sense, I've exposed not much a list of companies implicated in the genocide, but a system that it is made of the private sector, from arms manufacturers, tech companies, civilian businesses involved in construction and destruction, good and service producers, but even banks, pension funds, universities, that have become all enmeshed in the economy of the occupation that Israel has maintained for 57 years, that has helped it displace the Palestinians to destruction and segregation and replace them with settlers and settlements and infrastructure that Israel runs. This has generated an economy that was lucrative even before 20 months ago. So technically, I could have written part of this report 2-3 years ago. However, over the past 20 months, that economy has shifted toward an economy of genocide, in the sense after October 7, Israel had to switch all its veer toward an economy of war, declare the deficit, and the financial sector, banks, and other financial institutions have helped Israel gain all the capitals that through selling bonds and getting other finances through other means. This has given the means to Israel to sustain itself, but also the credibility to keep on attracting investments while credit ratings was falling apart. The trust of the market was shrinking. And then the military sector and other parts of the private sector have really profiteered from what has happened, like the weapon industry, the tech industry, have not only helped Israel carry out the destructive assault that it has unleashed against Gaza, but have helped the stock exchange of Israel rise of 179% and amass $220 billion from October 2023 until last month. 70 billion. It has the stock exchange has amassed 70 billion just in the last month. How it's possible?
These companies, we've approached them, and they have sent us statements to deny this is the case. They say it's untrue. For example, the AI development company Palantir has sent us a statement saying this is unequivocally untrue.
Well, it's interesting that the CEO of Palantir is on record, and this was it's publicly available. Once he was challenged, they say, "Oh, you are helping Israel kill Palestine, our families, kill Palestinians," and he said, "Well, yeah, most probably terrorists." It's an admission of knowledge that Israel was killing those numbers of people, and steadily the death toll has involved, as reported, 70% of women and children. So he knew that the level of killing involved civilians, but it does not matter for him. And again, I just assessed the reality. I made known my findings and legal assessment to the companies. Some of them have engaged in good faith, others have not. But the point is that they seem not to understand the legal framework. I mean, companies cannot engage in acts that are prohibited to states. The International Court of Justice and international criminal courts have proceedings against Israel for genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity, which is a red line. Companies cannot engage, especially with what the ICJ has declared an unlawful occupation that amounts to a violation of the UN Charter. So the companies can be held responsible for being directly linked to or contributing or causing human rights impacts. Here we are not talking of human rights violations. Here we are talking of crimes, plausibly genocide, an assault that has pulverized Gaza. And I directly link some of those companies like the big tech, the weapons manufacturers, and also some civilian businesses like companies like Hyundai and Volvo. Their machinery has been used to demolish and uproot homes to build settlements in the West Bank and to crash homes in Gaza. They know that. There is video evidence.
Francesca, before I let you go, I have about a minute left. I just want to ask you about this DINA project report that they're now saying there's evidence that they're about to publish a report which finds that sexual violence was widespread and systematic on October 7, especially around the Nova Music Festival. I just want to get your reaction to that.
Look, I cannot comment on this report, which is the first time I hear of. However, there has been an investigation of the Commission of Inquiry on Israel-Palestine about what happened on October 7. And it's been very difficult for the Commission of Inquiry to access the victims. I've read other reports written by including Israeli sources, Physicians for Human Rights, who have backtracked from what they said in the beginning. So, of course, I cannot pronounce myself on violence that I don't know of. If it has occurred, of course it deserves justice. There is no question about that. But how do we link that with what Israel has been doing for 20 months? Whatever happened on October 7, and there was violence, there were crimes committed against Israelis, but it doesn't justify this. And what do we say about the torture and rape that has even against the Palestinians inmate that's been justified in the Israeli Knesset?
Well, we're going to be looking deeper into that tomorrow on the programme. Francesca Albanese, thank you very much for joining us. Well, let's go back to our US correspondent, Mark Stone. Mark, you've been listening to both Francesca Albanese as well as the former IDF spokesperson about our special investigation, about our special report that we've done here this evening. I mean, as you can hear and feel at both sides, this is incredibly contentious, and the number of issues that we're dealing here from, the humanitarian foundation and the controversy surrounding that to issues around sexual violence after October 7.
Yeah, I was particularly struck by your interview with Jonathan Conricus, a man who I know well. He was the IDF spokesman when I was in Jerusalem. I got to know him very well. I dealt with him on almost a daily basis. And he does an incredibly good job at defending the Israeli Defense Forces. He was clearly a member of the IDF for many, many years. But I was struck in the interview that he repeated what he has said for so long, which is that effectively Hamas is everywhere. And if Hamas is everywhere, you've got to strike everywhere. And if civilians get killed, well, then that is unfortunate. The problem is that there is this issue of proportionality. And if you only have to look at the pictures do not lie. Look at Gaza. Look at the fact that large cities are completely flattened. They are dust. Rafah, Khan Yunis, others, they are Gaza City. They are effectively flattened war zones. And you then have to ask the question, is every mosque a Hamas stronghold? Is every hospital a Hamas stronghold? Is every house and school a Hamas stronghold? If the answer to that question is yes, well, then the issue of proportionality comes into it. And it is not correct that you can just strike any of those places under international law. All of that is going to continue to be debated as it has been for so many months as this war has continued. What I'm really interested in, and I've just been trying to get as much a sense of what's going on behind the scenes. I've spoken to some Qatari sources, I've spoken to some American sources, and the sense I'm getting, although not confirmed, the sense I'm getting, Yalda, is that over the next few days, Donald Trump is going to put more pressure on the Israelis than they have ever had put on them before. Why? Well, because Donald Trump wants to be seen as the peacemaker. He has said so many times, stop the killing, whether it be in Ukraine or whether it be in Gaza. He is looking at these pictures. He is looking at his legacy. He is looking for wins as well. And he wants to be able to say at the end of this week, with Netanyahu alongside him, I've got a ceasefire and that ceasefire will last. But we will see whether that happens. It is incredibly complicated.
Yeah, absolutely. Mark, thank you so much. Now, more than 90 people are known to have died in flooding in Texas, including 27 girls and staff members at a summer camp. And as crews search for the missing, there is more heavy rain on the way. So, with the disaster still unfolding, this is what we know so far. The storms inundated Texas's flash flood alley with its steep hills, canyons and valleys, much more vulnerable to severe weather. At least 10 inches of heavy rain fell around the Guadalupe River northwest of San Antonio, causing the river to swell dangerously. The communities of Hunt and Kerrville were hit hardest, as well as Camp Mystic. That's an all-girls Christian summer camp where 11 people are still missing. The camp is spread across two sites, a quarter-mile apart. The girls who died in the flooding are thought to have been in cabins closer to the river. Our US correspondent Martha Kauner reports.
They sing hymns in a bid to stay calm amid the panic of evacuation. Girls who had been at a Christian summer camp, like thousands of children from across Texas, spending their holidays in this part of the state, brought here by the rugged natural beauty. Over the weekend, it conspired against them, this river rising catastrophically.
Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God.
The enormity of what they survived at dawning at daybreak. 27 of their fellow campers died here, making this one of the worst mass casualty events for children in America's history.
That's every parent's nightmare. Every mom and dad. Last week, we were picking up our daughter from camp here in Hunt. Our girls have gone to camp here for a decade.
The destruction of the cabins tells its own tale, with mud up to the windows. As the water sloshed in, the camp director ordering girls onto the top bunks. But two cabins in particular, home to the youngest campers, were trapped in a whirlpool. These are some of the 8 and 9-year-olds who slept in the cabin known as Bubble Inn. 10 in total have been confirmed dead. 3 remain missing alongside a 19-year-old camp counsellor. Another 19-year-old camp worker, Chloe Childress, also died. Further up the river, a boys' summer camp was also engulfed. 7-year-old Brock struggling for words to articulate his ordeal.
We jumped up to another bed, like a top bunk, and like our bed starting tipping over, and like we got to the top really quick, and then we like this, and then like one of the walls like fall down.
The flooding risk here is well known. The lack of a warning system often debated. Local authorities saying it was too expensive to install sirens. Instead, text alerts in the middle of the night were the only option. The Trump administration's cut to the National Weather Service is also being scrutinised.
Many Democrat elected officials are trying to turn this into a political game, and it is not. This is a national tragedy, and the administration is treating it as such. We know the National Weather Service provided early and consistent warnings. They gave out timely flash flood alerts.
They slash through debris as rescue operations continue. The chance of finding more survivors here is dwindling, though. Attention now turning to the lessons which might be learned from this tragedy. Martha Kellner, Sky News.
And NBC correspondent Jay Gray sent this update from flood-ravaged Kerr County.
Now, we don't expect to see the flooding we saw over the 4th of July here, but still, there's nowhere for that water to go. Here's the Guadalupe River, and this is where it all started. You can still see it still running rather briskly through here and not within its banks at this point. In fact, 5 days ago, if you'd had some rubber boots on, you could have walked across and not been wet. It was just a trickle at that point. This is the remnants of a storm that saw this water push outside its banks and up more than 20 feet. In fact, let's show you the path where the water took. It went across and up this hill and all the way inside the building that is up at the top here. So it raged all the way up and into that building, and it made that huge move in less than an hour's time. So this river grew to a point that it's really never been seen in modern times in less than an hour, and it started to recede, and that's where these crews are on the ground now. Hundreds of first responders working into their 4th day, searching for survivors. They believe they're going to find more people alive in this debris, and they're using everything they have to do that. They are in the air, they're on the ground, they're on horseback, there are dog units here, there are military vehicles, high-profile vehicles going into areas where there is still water. There's thermal imaging. They're trying to find any heat traces and debris that could symbolize somebody trapped inside. They're using night vision goggles. This is an all-out effort, and talking to those rescue teams, they tell us they're going to keep working. They do believe there are people still alive, and they're not going to quit until they find everyone who is missing right now. That's an issue because we know there are more than 40 officially missing, but there were people on what was a holiday weekend, the 4th of July, camping in areas along the river here. They didn't sign in. They either set up a tent or had an RV and just set up camp. So the governor, with a plea yesterday to family members or friends who know of anyone who was down here and just on their own, to let the state know so they can add them to the list of people they are searching for. Also on that list, unfortunately, still 10 of those campers from Camp Mystic and a counselor. They're among those unaccounted for at this point.
That was NBC's Jay Gray. Well, joining me now is Daniel Bolden, a photographer who lives in Kerrville. Thank you so much, Daniel, for joining us here on the programme. You've been helping with the rescue efforts, as well as trying to document everything that's going on.
Yes, correct. First day was kind of photographing things, mainly the first responders, because they deserve all the credit in the world for just what they're doing. They're working, 12 hours around the clock. It's hot out here. It's humid, and they're just doing a really good job.
Yeah, I mean, this has obviously devastated the entire community and I guess on some level caught people by surprise.
It did. It caught a lot of us by surprise. We did get the warnings. We just didn't think it was going to be as bad. But the way that the storm, it just kind of sat on top of a really bad place of the North Fork and the South Fork of the Guadalupe. And those met up, and it just caused devastation.
And talk me through, Daniel, your friend unfortunately lost his life. Just tell me what happened to him.
Yeah, my good childhood friend, Julian Ryan, we grew up together all the way from elementary, and we walked the stage together. He was abruptly woken up at around 4:30, 5 a.m. The water was about waist deep inside of his home. He had his fiance, his kids, and his sister in there with him, and they weren't able to open the door, so he sprang into action, busted the window open, and unfortunately it got a main artery in his arm, and he essentially bled out. They tried endlessly call ambulance, but they couldn't make it because of how bad the roads were. And it's very sad, but it's a little better knowing, what he did saved his family's life.
Yeah, because of course, as you say, he bled out, and sadly that's why he died, not because of the flooding, and there were small children with him at the time.
Yeah, there was. He had 2 small children with him and his fiance, and what he did was very heroic, and it led them to, you know, saving their lives. So just all the higher power to my buddy Julian Ryan.
And Daniel, just tell me what you're seeing now, because obviously there's devastation all around you. What's been going on?
It's terrible. I mean, the landscape here is just forever changed. In a lot of parts, you weren't able to see across the river because of the huge cypress trees, but now you can see clear across, and it's just like a 5-mile stretch of pure devastation. But you know, we have a lot of volunteers out here, a lot of crews cleaning up. I'm sure you hear the chainsaws buzzing in the background. It's truly a beautiful sight to see everyone come together, you know, for the greater good and help out where they can.
Daniel, we were just talking there about this whole situation catching everyone by surprise. Is there anger in the community at the sort of lack of the authorities alerting people that this might be as bad as it was?
I don't think there's much anger, honestly. I think everyone's just kind of coming together, trying to help out those who can and those in need. It's been a full force effort with a lot of the locals, a lot of people from out of town. I don't think anyone can be angry at the moment right now. If you're from here, it's heartbreaking.
And where are people going? Are evacuation centres becoming available, and how are people getting access to sort of basic needs?
Yeah, there's plenty of evacuation sites set up. There's churches, Ingram Elementary. Just a lot of people are really stepping up, and there's tons of items and goods for people to use and have at this time. It's been a very beautiful sight to see.
And is the area where you are now, I know you're documenting everything, safe at the moment? Is there expectation that this could, we could see more flash flooding in the area? Are people being told to move out completely?
No, not completely. It's been pretty good since the 4th of July. It rained a little bit yesterday. We did get some warnings, and the river did come up a little bit, but not nearly as much as it did on July 4th. But everyone's just out full force working right now, just trying to clear the debris, trying to find any lives that are possibly still alive, and just trying to recover anyone's loved ones.
Daniel, we're really grateful that you've joined us here on the programme. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank y'all for having me.
Now, an Australian woman has been found guilty of serving up a poisonous lunch to murder 3 people and almost a 4th. Erin Patterson invited the victims, relatives of her estranged husband, for a beef Wellington, which she laced with highly toxic death cap mushrooms. But while the verdict is in, there are still questions about why she did it. Our Australia correspondent Nicole Johnson reports.
A case that's captivated Australia and the world about mushrooms and murder now has a verdict. Erin Patterson has been found guilty on all charges.
I think it's very important that we remember that we've had 3 people. 3 people have died, and we've had a person that nearly died and was seriously injured as a result, and that has led to these charges. I ask that we acknowledge those people and not forget them.
And the victims are Erin Patterson's father-in-law, Don Patterson, her mother-in-law, Gail Patterson, Gail's sister, Heather Wilkinson, and the only survivor, Gail's husband, Ian Wilkinson. He recovered after weeks spent in an induced coma. It all happened here on the 29th of July, almost 2 years ago, at Erin Patterson's house in the country town of Leongatha. She had invited her estranged husband's family for dinner and fed them individual beef Wellington pies, laced with toxic death cap mushrooms. Patterson's defence argued it was a tragic accident. The prosecution said the poisoning was intentional. After a trial of more than 9 weeks, the jury agreed, as parts of Patterson's testimony had unravelled in court. She had told her lunch guest she had cancer, but later admitted it was a lie. She said the mushrooms came from an Asian grocery store, while evidence suggested she'd visited places where the death caps grew. Patterson also said she did not own a food dehydrator, but CCTV footage showed her disposing of one at a local rubbish tip. As the verdict was read out in court, Patterson did not react. The prosecution did not present a motive, leaving one unanswered question: what was it that led her to kill her dinner guests with some of the world's deadliest mushrooms? Nicole Johnston, Sky News, Sydney.
Well, that's it from me and the team here on The World. But let's just show you some images coming in from the White House. I think we can show you those now of this meeting that we're expecting Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to have with Steve Witkoff, the US Special Envoy, as well as we're expecting him to meet with Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and Benjamin Netanyahu is expected to be there for the next few days, where he will also be with Donald Trump. Good night for now.